Well, we'll get going. Welcome everyone to another edition of the University of Idaho, Utah State University, and South Dakota State University collaborative sheep webinar series. Today, myself, Chad Page from Utah State University, will be joined with some of my collaborators, Dr. Melinda Ellison, Carmen Wilmore, both from the University of Idaho, and then extension sheep specialist from South Dakota, Jalen Whaley. I have the privilege today to introduce our speaker, Dr. Dustin Ranglak. Did I pronounce that correctly, Dr. Ranglak?
Yep, you're
Thank
good.
you. I recently had the opportunity to meet him at his field station that he runs, conducting predator research, and am thoroughly impressed and I'm really glad that he has the ability to come on today. Just a quick intro to him. Dr. Ranglak is the Utah Field Station leader and Predator Project leader for the USDA APHIS Wildlife Services National Wildlife Research Center located here near Logan, Utah. The research focus of the Predator Project is to understand and resolve human-wildlife conflicts with predators, including livestock depredation. This is done through a combination of captive research using little over 100 coyotes that they have on their research station that are maintained, and field research through the U.S. Historically, the project has focused entirely on mammalian predators, coyotes, wolves, bears, but has recently expanded to include work with avian predators as well, like ravens and eagles. Dr. Ranglak obtained his BS in Wildlife Services or Wildlife Science in 2008 and his PhD in Ecology in 2014 from Utah State University. He then spent 1 year at Montana State University as a researcher before spending 7 years in the University of Nebraska system as a professor of range and wildlife management. He has currently been with the NWRC since 2022. And with that, I'll go ahead and give you your time, Dr. Ranglak, and thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Really happy to be here with you all. I might go ahead and just turn my video off so that we can focus on the slides here, but hopefully everybody can hear me okay. And if you have any questions, I'm sure that we'll have plenty of time at the end. But I'm really excited and happy to be here to talk to you about some of the new livestock protection tools that we've been developing. As was mentioned, I am at the Utah Field Station of the National Wildlife Research Center, which is the research branch of USDA APHIS Wildlife Services. As was mentioned, our focus really is on resolving human-wildlife conflicts, and specifically, we focus on predators. So this is just kind of an overview, an overhead shot of our field station. I'm sitting in this building right here as we speak. But we are on 165 acres of land that is leased from Utah State University. But we are a federal research facility through the USDA. You can see we have a variety of different pens of various shapes and sizes. We have 54 pens in which we house approximately 100 coyotes at any given time. And we use this for developing and testing new both lethal and non-lethal tools for managing predators and their conflicts with people and livestock. This field station was established in 1972, so we have about a 50-year history of doing this work, and a lot of the advancements that we've had in the field of human-wildlife conflicts with predators and predation management have come through this facility and a lot of the great scientists and researchers that have come before me. So I'm really excited to talk to you about some of that work. And as I've already said several times, our focus really is on the development of tools, both lethal and non-lethal. I'm going to focus a little bit more on some of the non-lethal tools today, but we have a real wide toolbox of different things that we can use. And as we all know with tools, there are some tools that are better for certain jobs than others. Looking at this toolbox here, you got just about everything you can need as long as you don't need to drive in a nail, right? I don't see a single hammer in this picture. You need to make sure that you have the right tools for the right situation and for the right job. And that's one thing that I want to try to emphasize with you today, is that there is no one size fits all solution. There is no silver bullet to stopping predators, but every situation is going to be different and unique depending on the type of livestock that you're running, the type of predators that are in your area, the size of the area that you're running your sheep, your goats, your cattle on, whatever it may be. It's always going to be a different and unique situation. And so you're going to have to sort through this toolbox and figure out which tools are going to work best for you. And generally, I can kind of break this down into two main categories of tools. We have some tools where we are trying to manage the predators themselves. So we might be putting out using fencing to keep the predators out, different repellents, visual or acoustic, projectiles, translocation, hazing. We have a lot of different tools here, and I'm not going to talk about all of these today, but those are focused on trying to manage the predators themselves. We also have a lot of tools about managing the resources, managing the livestock, how we aggregate our grazing, how we shepherd, controlling the timing and location of birthing, night penning, removing carcasses and other attractants. All of these things are about managing the livestock themselves in order to reduce the risk of predation. And so we have kind of these two main categories here. Our work has primarily focused on managing the predators, but we are doing more and more on trying to understand the impacts of managing the resources and how that can work. But ultimately, the use of these tools is dictated by a lot of different things. First off, we need a tool that works. If we don't have an effective tool, there's no point in using it, right? But some of that is also based off of the ecology of the carnivore that we're dealing with. If you're dealing with coyotes, that's a lot different than it is with mountain lions, a lot different than it is with black bears, with grizzly bears, whatever else. Each of these animals is going to be a little bit different in the way that they respond to each of these different tools. It depends on the economics. We recognize and understand that the livestock industry, you're often operating on a very slim profit margin. And so these tools have to be economically viable. But one of the things that I think often goes unnoticed or doesn't get as much attention is it's really about the attitudes, beliefs, and perceptions of the user group, which in this case is our livestock producers, those of you who are on this call right now. Whether you think something works or not, and whether you're willing to try it out, makes a big difference as to whether that tool actually can be effective or not. So I'm going to go over a couple of different tools here in the next few slides. Some of these are some of the more tried and true tools that you've probably heard about for a long time. And then at the end, I'm going to get into a couple of tools that are brand new that you most likely have not heard about, that we're really excited about taking advantage of some new technology. So first, several years ago, Dr. Julie Young, who was my predecessor in this position, she, with a PhD student, really sought out to scientifically evaluate the effectiveness of livestock guardian dogs. And specifically, they were looking at several different breeds. Here in the bottom right, we have kind of our Great Pyrenees American, quote unquote, white dog that has been traditionally used for sheep producers as a livestock guardian breed. And that worked fairly well when we were mostly just dealing with coyotes on the landscape. And NWRC was part of the group that brought these Great Pyrenees dogs in and started promoting the use of livestock guardian dogs back in the 70s. But now in a lot of our places, we have grizzly bears, we have wolves, and we felt that there was a need to evaluate some different breeds. And so going clockwise here on our top left, we have the Portuguese Chão de Gado Transmontano. There's the Turkish Kangal dog, the traditional American white dog, and then the Bulgarian Karakachan. And they spent several years evaluating each of these different dog breeds in terms of their effectiveness for protecting sheep and cattle from a variety of different predators: coyotes, mountain lions, bears, grizzly bears. And what we found is that there are different dogs that are better for certain types of situations, depending on what it is that you are dealing with for your particular area. Like I mentioned, every tool is going to be different and unique. In areas with wolves and grizzly bears, these different breeds, these larger breeds that come from places with long history of dealing with large predators like wolves, like bears, grizzly bears, they did work better. There was an improved performance in reducing the amount of predation with these new breeds compared to the American white dog. There are some differences between these dogs in terms of their behavior. Some of them roam a little bit further from the sheep band. Some of them hang a little bit tighter. Some of them are more vigilant in paying attention to what's happening. Some of them are more perceptive at assessing what is a threat versus what is not, like recognizing a wolf from an elk, for example. But overall, all of these dogs are more similar than they are different, and which you choose is really kind of dependent on your particular circumstance and what you're dealing with. If you're only dealing with coyotes, personally, I think this Bulgarian Karakachan is a fantastic dog for dealing with coyotes. If you have wolves and grizzly bears, perhaps this Congo dog is a better choice. But ultimately, it's going to depend on your own personal preferences as to what you want your dog to do. And with all of these, it depends on how well you train your dog and how well they are bonded to the livestock species that you're working with, and to that particular band of sheep or herd of cattle, right? That's just as important as the type of dog is the training that you are providing. But we know that this can be very effective at reducing predation. Another tried and true tool that we have is fladry. And these red flags that we hang on a wire, whether this is just a regular wire or electrified, can be really effective. And this is really keying in on for wolves and for coyotes. They have this real strong fear of novel objects. If something is new out in their area, they tend to avoid it for a little while. And if you electrify this wire and create what we call turbo fladry, that's just even better, because then once they do start to investigate this a little bit better, then they can go out and they start to test this. They might hit that electrified wire, and then they get a reinforcement of this is a negative thing. So this can work really well. And honestly, one of our best tools. You can purchase this commercially. I think you do need to be prepared better. You can't just go and expect to buy this off the shelf. It's all custom made. It's usually about a 3 to 5 month timeline before it's ready. So you have to be prepared for it. But this is one of our best repellents, especially for wolves. But the limitations here is you're limited to a small area, right? You have to put flags around the entire area that it is that you want to protect. Otherwise, the wolves are just going to go around it. So you're not going to go out and fence off 100,000 acres, right? But if you're working with a relatively small area, this can be done, where maybe you're just dealing with a mile or two of fladry. And also, this works for short time periods. Generally, we're talking about 60 to 90 days where this will be very effective. After that, the wolves will test it and eventually break through. And once they break through, once they realize that this is not a threat, that it's not going to hurt them, then you are going to have a very hard time using this tool in that area again. So really, you have to limit it to that 60 to 90 days and then take it down. And that's often one of the hardest parts for producers, is to go out and take down this fladry when it has been working, because you want to keep it up, you want to keep that protection. But if you don't, you're just going to lead to more problems down the road. We do have some problems with this. Those flags tend to coil up in the wind. If I go back, you can kind of go back a couple pictures. You can kind of see that here. This one's already starting to coil up in the wind. And so you have to go out and uncoil those. And coyotes tend to break that boundary a little bit more quickly than wolves. If you think about the body size of a coyote, they're just smaller, so they can fit in between the gaps of these flags a little bit easier. So we went out and we created 6 new different designs of this and tested those against the original design using 2 different materials out here on our property, put them up in all different directions, let the wind blow on these, and then went out and kind of checked. And really what we found, that if the products that were least likely to coil were if you were to attach it, your flag, with this sort of shower curtain type system to where it can freely rotate all the way around, or you can just go and tie a knot in the top of it. That'll also keep it from coiling, keep it from flipping around. The other thing that we found, and I see there's a question here, how close these flags need to be set to each other. For wolves, we typically do 18 inches apart, but for coyotes, we adjusted that down to 11 inches. And when you shrink that down to an 11-inch spacing for coyotes, this seems to work much better. So we were able to show that making those changes, either adding these top knots or using a shower curtain if you're buying it brand new, and then reducing that spacing down to 11 inches, were much more effective for both wolves and coyotes. Okay, so those are some of our tried and true tools. Now I wanted to talk about some of the new things that we're working on. And one of these that I'm really excited about is this ear tag deterrent. You know, like I said, with Fladry, you're really limited in both time and space as to how long that's going to work and the size of the area that you're actually able to protect. You know, you're really limited there to a really small area for 60 to 90 days. And we know, especially here in the West, a lot of our producers are putting sheep out onto 100,000 acre allotments or bigger. And you just can't use Fladry in that situation. That's where livestock protection guard dogs are great, in that they're going out with the animals, but still those are expensive. They have to be properly trained, that you have to go out and feed it. So we came up with this idea for a flashing ear tag deterrent. And basically, this device that you can see right here is essentially something that you would purchase to screw onto the valve stem of the tires of your car. And then when you drive around at night, this has a motion sensor in it that causes it, once it's moving, it lights up, and it has these different LEDs that flash different colors and supposedly would make your car look really cool. Well, we thought, what if we were to attach that onto an ear tag so that when your sheep or your cows go running through the pasture because of a coyote or a wolf or a bear, suddenly it starts flashing like that, as you can see here in this video, with the idea that that's going to distract the predator and keep them from continuing their attack, that they just get too confused to know what's going on. So this is what it looks like when it's on a sheep, you know, relatively small. We just took those devices, attached them directly onto an ear tag. And then I have just a video here. It's kind of difficult to see, but you can see these different lights flashing as this band of sheep is grazing up on this hillside at night as they're moving around. So I think that this is really promising and really exciting because, you know, here's a tool that a protection device that the sheep are carrying with them wherever they go. And you don't have to worry about going out and feeding the dog or whatever else. It's there with them. So we trialed these out on, put out 1,700 tags on sheep and cattle in 9 different states. And I can see the question right there already from Gene. We found no impact on sheep behavior whatsoever. So they just continued to go about their regular business. It did not change the amount of time that they spent grazing or anything else. So that was one of our first questions, because we know that that's always going to be a question that producers are worried about, is how is this going to impact my sheep behavior? Of the producers that tested these tags, 92.3 of them reported that they had a reduction in the predation, either relative to previous years or relative to their neighbors who did not have these tags. So really great success rate in terms of qualitatively the perception of this. But we also had some sites where we had great quantitative data, where we had some bands that had these flashing ear tags and some bands that didn't. So we could see exactly, you know, in the same area with the same predators, same producer, how would this impact predation? And we found that it cut predation in half for ewes and for calves. So this was really a significant reduction in predation. We also, there was no difference in predation rates for yearling and adult cows, but for our most vulnerable groups, the ewes and the calves and lambs, this was very effective. The problem that we had with this from our initial design was just really poor durability. You know, we're literally just taking the device that you would buy off of Amazon. You know, it's all Chinese made to put onto your car tire, and then gluing it onto these ear tags. And so after 6 months, they pretty much all came back looking like you see here in this bottom picture. where the flashing mechanism had completely torn off. So we're currently working with engineers at Colorado State University to redesign this and fully integrate all those components into a single tag design, with the hope that this is going to be something that is economical, that cost per unit is going to be low enough that this could be a viable option for producers to put out on their herds, and that this would be something that would be very durable and last. This has a solar panel in there to keep it charging. So the idea would be that, this could basically act as the ear tag on that animal. You could still have the number on there, but it would also flash so that you're able to get that livestock protection. Last thing I want to jump into is just some research that we're doing with drones and taking advantage of new technology. And one thing that I just want to let you know, just right up front, drones can be a very effective hazing tool for reducing predation by wolves. This is something that we've tested and that we know, and I'm going to be able to show you some of the videos of that. But there are some significant limitations that still remain that we need to figure out. And so I just hired a graduate student who's going to be investigating this over the next couple of years to really identify what those limitations are, so we know when and where this tool is going to be effective, right? Because as I said before, not every tool works for every situation. And so we're working on identifying, well, what situations will this tool work in? So we are dealing with the Rogue Pack here in Southwest Oregon. This is a pack that is still protected under the Endangered Species Act. So there is no lethal control option available in this area. And from July 12th to August 1st of 2022, we had 11 confirmed depredations on cattle. So about every other night, this pack was killing a cow. Wildlife Services was called in to respond with what they call Night Watch, where essentially they have a group of Wildlife Services specialists out there with trucks, ATVs on the ground, handheld thermals, watching and just trying to notice when wolves come into the area. And then they go out and initiate hazing from the ground to push these wolves out and away from the cattle. They added in drones. They were able to get a special permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to be able to use drones as well, with the thought that they could just get an additional aerial advantage, a vantage point where they'd be able to detect the wolves easier from the drone, and then perhaps also use this as an actual hazing tool to drive the wolves away. So I'm going to show you some videos here. This is the first encounter that they had with a wolf. So the wolf is this kind of hot spot that you see here in the center. And as they're flying in with this drone, I want you to really pay attention to how this wolf responds. If this is going to be an effective hazing tool, what we really want here is to see a strong negative response to this drone. So at this point, the wolf has noticed the drone, and you can see that we're flying in a little bit closer on it. And this wolf, you can see the tail wag, you can see the play bow. This wolf is not afraid. He thinks this is a new toy. He's excited, he's interested, he's not afraid of this at all. And so already the crew on the ground is like, this isn't going to work. This is not going to give us that strong negative deterrent that we wanted. So they immediately started thinking about what we could do to change this. And the first thought is like, okay, well, let's add a speaker onto this. And so they went back, they added a speaker onto that drone. And here you can see this is that same wolf. Just 20, 30 minutes later, they're coming back with the speaker. And that wolf is just starting to make its way out into this pasture towards where the cows are. You can see again here, it's noticed the drone. Coming back to check it out. I think we see a little bit of a play bow here in a second. But then they're going to yell at this wolf with the drone through the speaker on the drone. And you can see immediately that's the type of response that we want, right? Immediately that wolf is like, oh crap, this is people. I know what people are, and I need to get out of here. And so immediately that wolf is headed back into the forest where we would like that wolf to be, away from where we have our cattle in this area. So that addition of the speaker made a huge difference, in being able to push this wolf away from where we had the cows. And you can see, he's going to duck under the fence here and head back into the forest where we would like that wolf to be. Beyond that, we're actually able to stop interactions. And one of the things when you're out flying is you often are paying as much attention to the cows as you are looking for wolves, because they're going to tell you if something's going on. And you can see all these cows start moving, and there are two wolves. There's one right here, and then there's another kind of over in this group. Oh, here and here. There's two wolves right there, starting to run through, starting to harass these cattle, starting to look out against which one might be vulnerable. But here we are coming with the drone. We start yelling at it through the speaker. The one wolf that just went off the screen, he's already leaving. This one, he's already stopped, paying attention to the cattle. He's on his way out. He knows that he's been busted, knows that there's going to be a ground crew coming in, that his opportunity to take a cow has been lost. So we were able to stop those interactions. And as this video goes on, you'll see at one point this wolf kind of slows down and looks back, thinks, okay, maybe I can go back there. Maybe this drone thing isn't that scary after all. Right here, they yell at it again, and again, he picks up the pace and keeps moving out. So very effective tool. And now here's one of the coolest videos. Here we're actually just able to stop an attack. So this steer right here has two wolves actively hanging onto the hindquarters, and there's a third wolf right here with it. You can see as we come in with the drone, the one wolf is already kind of starting to move away, notice the drone, but the other two are still actively attacking that steer, hanging on its hindquarters. We come in with the drone, yell at it with the speaker. You can tell when that yell happens by the way these wolves respond. Boom, they're gone, right? So here we're able to stop an attack. The producer called the producer out next morning. They went out and checked on this herd. They did find the steer. He had some injuries, a little bit of doctoring, and he was just fine. So from that, with the addition of these drones, there were just 2 additional depredations over the next 85 nights. So if you remember, we were talking about every other night previously, and this went to basically every 6 weeks after we initiated Night Watch with the drones. So I'm sure everybody's really excited right now, about ready to run down to Best Buy and pick up a drone to protect their sheep. It's not that simple. There are some real limitations here with battery life and flight time. So the drones that we're flying at this time had about a 22-minute battery life. And even worse if you're flying very aggressively or if it's in windy conditions. We've upgraded to a different model, and now we're getting, advertised in very, very calm flying and calm conditions. You're getting 42 minutes, but in actuality, it's closer to 30. Here's a case where we can see that we have a wolf attacking a cow. This cow's somehow gotten separated from the rest of the herd. We just get close enough to where we can tell that there's an attack. We call in the ground crew. Here's the guy on the ground crew coming in to respond on foot right away. But you'll notice we're just about to hit a battery sensor, about low life. This drone's got to turn around and head back to base. It has to fly the 1.5 miles back to where they were staged. It has to land, power down, switch out the batteries, power back up, and take off. That's going to take at least 20 minutes before you can get back out there. We've already called in the ground crew. He goes in and he's able to break that up. But that particular cow, its injuries were already severe enough that it had to be put down. So you have real limitations in your coverage, how long you're able to be out flying and actually doing this, just because the battery life for these things is just not quite where you would like it to be yet. I also want you to just notice in this picture right now, this is very flat, open country bordered by thick timber. This is kind of ideal situation for searching for this, because in this case, our cows are out in this flat open and the wolves are in the trees. And so we can just kind of monitor the tree lines, see when the wolves come in, and they're very obvious once they step out into the open. It's going to be very different if you're working in a much more timbered area. And so there's a wolf right here, this little dot where my cursor is, that's about to run into these trees. There are cattle in those trees as well. So we're really, wanting to make sure that we get that wolf out of there, because this is still going into an area that we want to protect those resources. And I just want you to notice as we get over these trees, not only this is more difficult flying, we have to pay real attention to how high we are relative to how high the trees are. We can't be dropping right down on top of the wolf. We got to make sure that we don't crash here. But it's much more difficult to see and find the wolf. I know where he is in this picture, but it's going to take a little bit. And you kind of have to see him move before he shows up. And he's about to go into one of these openings here. And I'm trying to remember which one. Here he is right there, right? But you can see now that you know where he's at, you can kind of track him. But if you lose track of him and you're trying to find him for the very first time, this wolf could very easily escape detection and you wouldn't know. And so here we're able to kind of keep track of this wolf. We're still able to kind of shepherd it out of this area. We're still able to yell at it with the speaker or play music or whatever else to try to keep this out of the area. But we are much more limited. We can't go down much lower than we are right now because of the trees. We're going to crash. So our ability to fly the drone and our ability to detect the wolves is going to be much more limited when you are dealing with trees or rough topography, just because it's going to be much harder to detect those animals. So some of the research that we're looking at is what is the relative cost and effectiveness of this? This is not just a drone from Best Buy that we're flying. This is a DJI model. It's Chinese made. There are really not very many American made options, and the ones that are much more expensive. This particular drone costs $20,000 by the time you purchase it, equip it with the speaker that you need, the spotlight that you need, the thermal that you need, get extra batteries and everything else. You could easily get up to $30,000 by the time you purchase all of the different things that you need. In addition, in order to do this, we needed a permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in order to be able to go out and use this for wolves and harass them. And as part of wildlife services, you have to have your Part 107 license from the FAA in order to be able to fly the drone commercially. And there are 2 separate trainings and hours. You have to have at least 20 hours of flight time before you're able to even fly at night. So this is not just like go pick up a drone at Best Buy and you're set. This is the type of drone is very expensive and requires specialized training in order to be able to fly it. How do the wolves and other wildlife respond to this? Is this just kind of like me busting out my leaf blower in the fall? I blow all all my problems into my neighbor's yard, but I don't have to worry about it anymore, right? That's not what we want. We don't want to just move this problem down to the next producer along the line, but we want to know where those wolves are going. We want them to be going back up into the forest and preying on elk and deer like they're supposed to, and not coming down onto the cattle, onto the sheep. And then what is the habituation rate? We know that with all of our non-lethal tools, eventually the animals habituate to it and they decide it's no longer a threat. I think that we're going to get a much longer period of time where this is an effective tool just because it can be adaptive and responsive to the wolves. It's coming at them differently. We can say different things. It's going to be unique to each situation. It's going to be moving. But I do think that it's possible that the wolves will eventually habituate to this. And then how is this going to work in other areas that do have more timber, do have more topography? At what's the cutoff where this no longer becomes a useful tool? So as I mentioned, in our non-lethal toolbox, we have a lot of tools. There are a lot of things that you can do on your own to help protect your sheep, your goats. There are a lot of things, a lot of resources available that Wildlife Services can help provide you with. So if you're trying to figure out what tool is going to be best for your particular situation, I really recommend that you make a phone call to USDA Wildlife Services, to the state office in your area. They can connect you with a wildlife specialist who's familiar with your area, who lives in your community, who can come out and help you identify what your threats are and what the best way is to reduce those. because there are a lot of options here. And some of them are going to work in some situations and others just are not. You know, if you have just a handful of animals, you know, doing some night penning, bringing them into a secure area, you know, you're going to stop almost all of your predation problems right there. But if you're running tens of thousands of animals, bringing them into a night pen is just not going to be viable, right? And so all of this is going to be unique. And it's also only as good as the person using it. You know, I talked about Fladry. I think Fladry is a fantastic tool, but you have to use it correctly. You have to maintain it. You have to go out and uncoil any of those flags that have gotten coiled up. Or if there's a stretch of it that has gotten knocked down from whatever reason, you got to go put that back up, because that tool is only going to work as long as those flags are flapping in the wind. And if they're down, those wolves, those coyotes are going to see an opportunity and they're going to cross over it. So you have to have the right tool for the job, and you have to have the right training and expertise as to how to apply that tool for it to be effective. So again, that's why I recommend that you reach out to your local wildlife services state office, get in touch with your local state wildlife agency, talk to your neighbors, find out what they're doing, and make sure that you are using the tool that's going to be right for your situation. So with that, I know we got a lot of questions here, and I'm going to do my best to try to answer as many of those as possible. So Chad, do you want me to just go through this list, or do you want to read them out to me, or?
Yeah, you know, I can kind of sift through some of these for you. I think there's a number of them we can combine into similar type questions. Maybe if you want to just address the first one, and if your station is involved with any kind of approving of different drugs and things like that. I think it's fair for you to take that one real quick.
Yeah, so there are a number of different toxicants available for predators, and I know in other countries, like in Australia, they have some different tools. So it's not specifically under my project, but one of the other projects within the National Wildlife Research Center, they do have a toxicologist on staff. She is evaluating a new toxicant that would replace sodium cyanide, which is what Wildlife Services uses in M44s. It's called PAP. It's from Australia, and it is shown to be highly effective at killing coyotes. And that death is a very humane death as well. We are going through the process of testing all of that so that it can be registered for use within the United States. One cool thing about PAP is it does have the ability to have an antidote, so that if one of your livestock protection dogs, family pet, whatever else were to go and be exposed to that toxicant, there is a window of time. It's a relatively short window, 20 to 30 minutes, but there is a window of time during which that toxicant, the effects of that toxicant could be reversed. So we're in the process of testing all of that and working it through for approval through the EPA.
Yeah, that's great. And that reverse time, you want to expound on why that could be potentially advantageous?
Yeah, so you know, having that ability to reverse this. So if you had, like I said, if one of your livestock protection dogs went and was exposed to the toxicant, or one of your herding dogs was exposed to that toxicant, you would have the opportunity to reverse that toxicant and keep that animal alive. Where with sodium cyanide and a lot of the other drugs that are out there, once you're exposed to it, that's game over. And so having that ability to reverse that is huge.
That's great. I'm kind of going along. We'll just stay on that same thought process with livestock guardian dogs. We have some maybe goat producers asking you to repeat a couple of the names of the breeds that you mentioned, and maybe you could flip back to that slide unless you remember them all.
Yeah, so there's the Turkish Kangol. Let me just go back to that slide. That'll help a little bit. Let me just click back here.
Or maybe even maybe expound on some of those breeds that you guys have found that stay with the flock a little bit better, and kind of retouch that a little bit.
Yeah, so the Turkish Kangol dog, this dog tends to be very aggressive. It's really great. Well, aggressive towards things on four legs, I should say. It's great with people, but anything with four legs, it's going to go and it's going to really cause problems for, unless it's bonded to it appropriately. So you have to really make sure that the training is right if you're using a Turkish Kangol. They're very aggressive, really great at wolves and bears. The biggest problem with the Turkish Kangol is they can't count. So you might only have two Kangols, and let's say they come across a pack of 10 wolves. They're not smart enough to recognize that they're going to lose that battle. They're going to go try to take on those wolves. You can decide if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you're probably going to lose your two dogs right there. The let's see, this one here is from Portugal. This is the Transmontano. It is very good at assessing threats. So it was the best of these breeds at recognizing danger from non-danger. So they tested out, putting out a wolf decoy that would howl versus putting out an elk decoy that would bugle, and see how the animals responded to it. All of them came to investigate that noise, that disturbance. But this Transmontano really recognized, oh, this is an elk, not a concern, where the others spent a little bit more time investigating, to the point where this Kangol dog was spending so much time trying to harass that elk decoy that they actually called off the trial because they were worried about it not being off defending the sheep that it was supposed to be with. And then lastly, this Karakachan, this was just a great dog, really good at very vigilant. I think it was the most vigilant of all the dogs, really just keeping its eyes and ears out, paying attention to what was going on, which made it really great for coyotes, because coyotes can be a little quieter, a little sneakier. So they're all different, but they're more similar than they are different. And so I think it's just a matter of kind of doing your own bit of research, figuring out what's going to be best for you and the type of dog that you want. I'm happy to talk more specifically with people offline after this if they have more specific questions about any of these breeds or anything else from this. But yeah, those were the main ones. So the Turkish Kangol, the Portuguese Transmontano, and the Bulgarian Karakachan.
Awesome. Thank you. And then you had a number of questions with the flash tags. What a couple of people asked, were those studies done in combination with other deterrents, and were dogs also a part of that?
I would have to look back. I wasn't directly involved with those personally, so I'd have to look back. I'm sure that they probably still had, we were just putting these tags onto animals, and the producers were just kind of still going about their regular daily operations. And so I imagine that there were dogs in most of these cases, because I know that most of these had dogs, where we were doing that real quantitative, where we were able to specifically show, specifically track behavior and specifically track predation rates and how that changed. We made sure that those groups were kept equal and that treatment was applied similarly. So if the tagged group had dogs, the untagged group also had dogs there, right? So that we weren't confounding anything there. Did I answer that question?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. With those tags, I know you had briefly mentioned a little bit about the durability and how they're attached. Could they also be attached to a collar, or what other things do you think may change about those tags?
Yeah, I think you could attach them to a collar. Absolutely. Our thought was to attach it to an ear tag, just because that's something that a lot of producers are already doing, right? You already have to put tags on your sheep. This is something that everybody's already set up for. So we wanted to make it, ease of use, ease of application, still using the exact same ear tag applicator that you would use. And our goal is eventually to sell this design to some of the commercial tag producer companies, so that they could produce these at scale at a lower cost than we're able to produce them on our own, so that they can be applied. So we're working on just kind of fully ruggedizing and fully integrating those components into a single design right now. We should have 25 prototypes of that completed here next month that we're then gonna take out to some of the different tag manufacturers to see if we can't get their interest in at least developing a larger scale test batch for us, that we could then go out and see if that durability was improved through that process.
And I know that in our conversations, Dustin, you had mentioned that not every sheep needs one, right? Not every sheep in your band or flock needs one, but you do have a question of what percentage of sheep need one, do you think?
I'm not sure. I don't think that you need every sheep. My very gut thought initially is probably half, but it could be less than that. That hasn't been specifically evaluated as of yet. But that's something that we are interested in. You know, like what is the smallest percentage of your band of sheep that you need to put these tags on for it to be effective? You know, that's going to be a great question to answer just as we think about the economics of all of these. You know, our hope is that these end up just being a few dollars a tag, so that it is economical and feasible for you to put these on as many different as many animals as possible, but also recognize that profit margins are thin and that even just a few extra bucks per head could be a real limitation. So we're trying to figure that out. My gut would tell me 50 to 60%. You want you want that hillside to light up like a disco when those sheep start running from a coyote or from a wolf or whatever else, to really get that impact. So I think that you do need to have a good portion of the flock, but I don't think it needs to be all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great thing to point out when we're talking about an animal that maybe doesn't have as much return on revenue as maybe a cow, right? It's a little bit harder for us to justify that cost. So I'm trying to keep all the questions together with flash tags and things like that, but there's quite a few questions on drones. But the last one for flash tags, what do you think about maybe combining the flashing device in conjunction with fladgery?
I mean, I always will recommend like a real integrated approach. You know, the more tools that we can use, the better. And so I I would recommend, you know, having dogs and flattery and flash tags and a drone on standby. You know, like the more
Yeah.
things that you're able to do, all of those are just going to improve the chances that you're going to prevent those depredations. So I think that these are things that are stackable. At some point, you know, does it become worth the cost of doing all the things at once? And that's where it's figuring out the right tool for your situation. I really like flash tags for when you're working out on a large in large open country, on large open ranges, large grazing allotments like we have here in the West, because flattery is not going to be an option for you there, but the flash tags can work great. And so again, that's where I kind of recommend like thinking specifically about your particular situation and what's going to work best for you. Both what are you willing to do, what are you willing to invest in financially, and the time for maintenance or application or whatever else, but also for your particular situation, the size and species, the size of the area, the species of livestock you're working with, the species of predators that you're dealing with, how prevalent or how impactful predation has been on you in the past. You know, if you maybe only lose one sheep every 10 years, well, it's probably not worth it for you to invest a lot of money into this. But if you're getting persistent, repeated problems, then yeah, the more you can invest in it, the better.
Awesome. So with the drones, there's some questions on, what kind of optics were used or normal flight time. You touched on that a little bit, depending on the drone type. But you kind of want to talk about maybe some of the technical stuff, or like what optics need to be on these types of drones. You're obviously flying mostly at night, so
Yeah, this is night flying with the thermal imagery. I don't know the specific technical details. I haven't been involved in it. At that standpoint, I'm more on the research side, evaluating how well this is going to work. But it's not cheap. You can't get away with cheap stuff here. So flying at night, you need to have really high quality thermal optics, and especially like the more trees you have, the more sensitive that you need the imagery to be, right? And so the biggest thing that we found though is you have to have a speaker. Absolutely have to have a speaker. Without that speaker, it is useless. And we've been testing a number of different sounds, and it seems like the human voice is the most effective. We've tried music, we've tried sirens, we've tried gunshots, train whistles, all of that. We haven't really done it in a systematic kind of randomized approach yet that you would need for scientific evaluation, but just kind of anecdotally, the human voice seems to be the best thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you think that these drones would work good for your avian species? There's one question that talks about issues with vultures in their area.
Yeah, I mean, black vultures are a huge problem throughout the East. Brian Kluver at the Florida field station of the National Wildlife Research Center, basically his whole entire program is devoted around black vultures. So I don't know specifically what they've done with drones there, but I know that they use drones for deterring birds from around airports, from around crop fields, dealing with sunflowers and stuff. We are beginning to have some conversations about using drones as kind of an aerial shepherd to protect against golden eagles and bald eagles out here in the West, where they're killing a lot of sheep, particularly in like Wyoming and Oregon. So I think that there is the potential there, but very early on still as to like what type of drone is going to work best, what type of flight pattern is going to be most appropriate, and everything else. So exciting technology that I think has a lot of application, and I think definitely would have application to vultures, but I'm not as familiar with the specifics on that.
Okay.
I can connect people if
Yeah,
you want.
and I maybe if you want to go to your last slide with your contact again, I would just
That's what I was
anyone
just about to do.
anyone who wants to contact Dr. Rainlack after this, feel free to, or reach out to any of the panelists for this webinar series. We'd be happy to help you out or get you in touch with Dustin. Out of respect for your own time, we're going to take enough questions to kind of fill up the hour, if that's all right, Dr. Rainlack.
Sure.
But some of these questions, unless there's one that's really pressing to you that you see, is there one that you would like to answer?
Let me just kind of quickly scroll through. So I see one about, shooting coyotes, lethal removal. I talked about non-lethal stuff here mostly just because I think that those are generally the tools that are most available to people, and are most applicable in the broadest number of circumstances. And I always believe an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of the cure. A dead coyote or a dead wolf doesn't kill any livestock, right? We know that much. But one problem that you face is once you go in and do lethal removal, that changes the age and the sex structure of that predator community. You generally are the first animals that you kill are the older animals and the animals that have established territories. And when you remove that territory, when you open that up, that's just like having a new house go up for sale on your block, right? You have 15 different people who come to wanting to buy that house. Well, now you got 15 different coyotes who are coming to try to move in and take over that territory. And that's whether you're talking about coyotes, whether you're talking about wolves, whether you're talking about mountain lions, any of these species that are maintaining a territory. When you remove that territory holder, all of those others come in. Those ones that are coming in tend to be younger, and younger animals tend to cause more problems with livestock. And so in general, I tend to feel that lethal removal can give you a very short-term window where your problem is better. Your problem is solved, and maybe that's all you're looking for. You're trying to get through your lambing season. And so, yeah, going out and doing some heavy-handed lethal control where it is legally allowed and all of that can be effective for that short window. But then you've just opened up all of that space and you're going to get others moving into that territory. With coyotes, we know that they begin to reproduce younger and they have larger litter sizes when you reduce the density. So by going in and killing, you actually oftentimes end up with a higher density of the predator than you started with. And so oftentimes you just tend to make things worse. If you have coyotes on your property that are not killing sheep, not killing goats, I would leave them because they're keeping the riffraff out. Once they start killing, then that's when you would probably want to go in and consider doing some lethal removal. See a question about some other guardian dogs and donkeys. I've heard and have had some talks with people about donkeys. I don't know much about that, but it's something that we would be interested in evaluating more. I'm not doing any feral hog research specifically, but there is a whole feral swine research program. Just like I run an entire predator project with multiple researchers, there's one specifically focused on that for feral swine. Domestic dogs, I don't have any experience with that, but I know that's becoming a real problem in a lot of places, feral dogs.
Yeah, I would imagine that just as the demographics of our farms change and more urban areas and things like that, that domestic dogs are just going to be a whole new thing. However, there are leash laws and things that people should be obeying, but I mean, it's hard when Fido next door comes over to play, you know.
Yep. Where you can get the dogs. So all of the dogs that we tested, those different breeds, we imported them directly from breeders in the countries where they came from. And depending, like I know Wildlife Services in Colorado is still working with that and trying to place Congo dogs. So if you live in Colorado, get in touch with your Wildlife Services agent there. Otherwise, I don't know specifically. I can try to look that information up if you contact me. Seems like someone else has good experience with Krakachans. I'm not familiar with that specific brand of or type of snare. Where you could buy flash tags. So those are something that we just literally built ourselves. So you can find those devices on Amazon and to light up your car tires, you could buy those. And I wasn't here when those were produced, but I believe they just literally glued them using a very strong adhesive glue onto the tag, probably like drilled a hole through the tag for that valve stem to go onto and then glued that on firmly. But these flash tags are not commercially available at this time. We're working on building these. And I don't know if they'd be effective against mountain lions. We have not, I mean, mountain lions were in the areas where we've used them, but they haven't been specifically tested on mountain lions. And we haven't specifically tested a lot of our non-lethal tools on mountain lions. But that's something that I have a new student who will be starting this fall to specifically evaluate some non-lethal tools on mountain lions in kind of the Sierra foothills of California. So that'll be exciting. Bear predation, all of these things can be useful for bears. Electric fencing is great for bears. Dogs can be really great for bears. Those Congo dogs are really aggressive towards bears and can do a really great job. So it just kind of depends on what type of bear you're dealing with too. Grizzly versus black bear. Yeah, a lot of questions about hawks and eagles and avian predators. Like I said, I'm working on as soon as Congress passes the federal budget for the year, I will be planning on hiring avian specialist, a PhD level researcher to specifically come in and work on researching and developing new tools for dealing with eagles, ravens, and we're hearing a lot from Texas, Oklahoma about the crested caracara, which is a bird that's moving up, a raptor that's moving up from Central and South America, where in some places people are saying that they're having more problem with caracaras than they are with coyotes. So I'm going to be hiring somebody to specifically look at all of those questions. So
That's great. Well, I would say let's have you take one more, Dustin, and then respect for your time, we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, so it looks like kind of the last one that I've seen maybe a couple of times is just like the different flashing lights that you can put out around the pasture. They mentioned night guard. There's also fox lights. They can be effective, but again, it's a short-term type of thing. Generally, once your predators habituate to that light that's, motion detected or whatever, they realize that it's not actually a threat, then it's not very useful. So I would recommend, going out and moving those frequently. They can buy you a short period of time, but I tend to think with those sort of lights that you're maybe just getting a couple of weeks at most of that being effective, just because they just sit there. It's a very passive device that gives the wolves, the coyotes, whatever you're dealing with, a lot of time to get used to it and to realize that it's not actually a threat. So if you're going to use those, move them around, mix them up, combine it with, there are some different auditory mechanisms too that will play sounds either at random intervals or on a motion sensor. There's a new one that I've seen called a Spark Away. And I'm not giving any sort of an endorsement of this product, to be very clear. I can't do that, but it is a device that basically creates like a loud sparking sound when motion activated, and it literally creates some spark. So you'd want to be careful about using it in any area where you have a potential fire hazard. But I've heard of people having good success with that. Again, it's an auditory device, but also you see the sparks. So it does provide a little bit of a flash as well at night. So it's just about trying not being afraid to try new things. I mean, we've tried even those like inflatable men that you see out at the used car dealership, right? The flapping around and all that. All of these things can work for a period of time, but eventually the animals habituate to them. And so you got to keep it fresh, rotate it, try new things, move them around all the time. That's where you're going to be most successful.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Ringlang. I think this has been extremely helpful. I like you really think that having as much knowledge as you can so you can pull, those tools from the toolbox, the analogy that you made, is perfect. Well, thank you for joining us. We truly appreciate it.